Well, hello, audience. My name is Dr. Ann Graber, also known by some as Dr. Grandma. And I am here to basically tell you about how logotherapy found me and what it meant to me and what I did with it and what I'm still doing with it for myself and others. So I hope it will be of value to you too. As a mother of young children, I first read Viktor Frankl's work informally, and then I was wondering how can I study this formally in toward a graduate degree, but the curricula I looked at, none of them featured logotherapy, and I felt I cannot go to Vienna to study logotherapy. After all, we have kids to raise. And so to my astonishment, in 1980, I find a flyer in my mailbox announcing that an introductory course in logotherapy will be taught in Kansas City by Professor Dr. James Yoder. And I felt, I live in St. Louis, I can make it to Kansas City if I can't make it to Vienna for a week. Yes, and I did, and I'm very pleased that I went. That began my formal study of logotherapy. So, after all, eventually so this was 1988, and then in 1993, I finally finished my studies in logotherapy and earned my diplomate. And my diplomate is signed by Dr. Robert Barnes, president of the Viktor Frankl Institute. And then I started to teach logotherapy for the Viktor Frankl Institute. And it quickly developed that we need to attract people who had English as at least secondary language, and who were inquiring from great distances. So we needed to institute a distance learning program. And that began in 1994 for the Viktor Frankl Institute. And I'm looking at the amazing increase in students through the years. So in 1994, only 2 people completed a distance learning course in Introduction to Logotherapy, and by 2011, the people I personally taught, 354 had completed coursework, and since each one of them is taught individually through writing papers, reading assigned readings, and telephone tutorials, that was quite astounding to us. And also, they came from 33 countries. So that was 2011. And then, by that time, I had been working on my credentials, and I not only had earned the diplomate in logotherapy, but in 1999, I earned my Doctor of Ministry degree. And by 2002, I earned my Doctor of Philosophy in Pastoral Counseling degree. And so I was then asked to teach for the Graduate Theological Foundation in our first course was taught at the Notre Dame University at the center there, and we had again an international group who came for a week, and that started really the interest of logotherapy at the Graduate Theological Foundation. I had written my Diplomate dissertation, and it was titled Viktor Frankl's Logotherapy, Ecumenical Psychology for Pastoral Care. And it caught on. And then in 2012, the Graduate Theological Foundation established a graduate center for pastoral logotherapy and appointed me its director. And when we submitted our program to the Vienna Institute of Logotherapy, to our astonishment, it was accredited by them, and I personally received an honorary lifetime membership as an accredited logotherapist and teacher. And so this is what I have been doing ever since. Also, we established a connection with the Viktor Frankl Institute, where people who complete a course at the Viktor Frankl Institute in the U.S., it can be transferred for credit to the Graduate Theological Foundation and vice versa. So we had a reciprocal arrangement there, and I hope it is still active. And this brings me to the now, and what we're doing right now is primarily what I'm doing right now. My work to earn my Doctor of Ministry degree dealt with death and dying. And I wrote a book, The Journey Home. And especially during this epidemic we're living through, most of the course inquiries I have had pertain to death and dying, and then a subsequent course on grief and bereavement. Now we have to keep in mind that Viktor Frankl was very adamant about the transitoriness of life. There are some things we cannot change, and the transitoriness of life is one such thing. We shall all die one day, and it helps to prepare for it. The sooner in life we face our fears about dying, the better off we will be, because then if we decide to live, to give it the best we have to offer as each challenge comes along, what is there to fear at the end? I have done what I could with what I had available. And so these two courses are based on that premise. And they're becoming rather popular. In the last 2 years, I'm looking at the numbers here, about 50 in each course. And 50 students have completed these two courses, which is really remarkable to have such a sudden interest, because many of our students at the Graduate Theological Foundation are in some form of ministry, and they define ministry rather broadly as human services, but many work in hospitals as chaplains, as caregivers, primarily as spiritual caregivers. And so they would have a need to be attending the dying and then the grieving. So this is basically my summary of what I do. Viktor Frankl's emphasis is on the meaning in life. And here, especially, coming from another culture, I came out over here as a young adult. I grew up in Austria, um, and we had a more culturally ingrained lifestyle. And I arrived here, and we have a family, and um, everything goes much more casual here. And so I really, really had to find ways and means of what do I want to, how do I want to raise my children? And so Viktor Frankl's premise became my primer for child rearing. And so what he is big on is be authentic. Got to be true to yourself, as Shakespeare already reminded us, and um, valuing the uniqueness of every individual. For instance, our older son was forever planting a seed and watching it grow. Our daughter, even as a little child, animals would run after her if they were hurt. And so she liked to take care of little animals. And so this was, they each had a unique leaning towards something different. We couldn't have forced her to plant seeds or him to take care of animals who were hurt. But recognizing that each person is different, they will have other priorities that are important to them. And then the big one, especially here, after all, I came to the land of the free and the brave. And then I'm discovering, yeah, we have freedom. You can do anything you want. But are you willing to take the responsibility for your choices? And I think today, especially, we have to look at that. Yes, we're free to choose, but every choice comes with a corresponding responsibility. And then another concept that Frankl emphasizes is, okay, if you've erred in the past and the same situation shows up, would you want to repeat it? And so he points to self-transcendence as making a different choice the next time, maybe a better choice, a nobler choice, and then you transcend who you were once before, and you raise your moral compass a little higher. And then when you function from that stage, you're forever looking for what would be a better choice than the one I made before. So these were the things I emphasized in child rearing and education, and I think they're still very, very prevalent. And as I said later on, when also in the West, especially here, um, we have such a taboo about death and dying. And now, with so many people affected and fearing it, and what if, we have to face it. And so, as I said, Frankl admonishes us to look at our fear of death earlier in life, so and then it becomes our choice can be to live the best we can, and then we will have nothing to fear when the end approaches. He was a good friend of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Dr. Ross did a lot of research on death and dying, and she was a board member, and I'm looking at a forum here from the year 1981, and she is listed as a board member in the United States of the Viktor Frankl Institute. Okay, so what they have in common is Viktor Frankl, yes, he was in Vienna and she was in Switzerland growing up and earning their medical degrees. But culturally, there was a greater similarity. Um, about standards, about culturally accepted standards. And even though she was Christian and he was Jewish, still the cultural idiom also has a strong influence on us. And so this very thing about being responsible, and once you make your choice, you live it. You live the consequences. And certainly he proved it in his life, and she also proved it in hers. And by being supportive to each other in the early days, coming to the United States in her early career and his more established career, gave him a lot in common. And this is particularly noticeable with striving to be authentic, be real, and do what you feel is the best in given circumstances, and not always to look for so and so says I'm right, or so and so says he's right and therefore I must be wrong. This I encountered very often in my early days here. We're talking about 60s, 70s, less so now. So is there a leaning in that direction that we have to be true to ourselves first so we can be true to others, and we can respect the individuality of others, and we don't have to boss them too. You have to do it this way. A wonderful way to simplify much of what Frankl taught is to take Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's quick explanation that she gave to medical students. And it goes like this. If you draw a circle, that represents a person. And then she says, we have different aspects to ourselves. And she draws a diagonal line across the circle. Now she has two halves. And then she draws another diagonal line at 90-degree angles. And now she has four quadrants. And she says medicine deals with the lower quadrant, primarily the body, the soma. And psychiatry deals with the one on the left. We can call it the mental. And the quadrant on the right, we can call it the emotional. So every one of us can identify, we have a mental part and we have an emotional aspect. And so psychiatry primarily deals with these two aspects of ourself. And then she says, but there is another part to us. And she says, now I heard her giving this explanation in Zurich when she went back to talk about what it's like to be a psychiatrist in New York. And she says, now, in Switzerland, everybody knows we not only have a body, and we also have this mental, emotional part, and we have a spirit. But she says, I'm in New York. If I call this upper quadrant a spirit, I'll be accused of teaching theology instead of psychiatry. So what do I call it? I don't know. So she says She looks around this audience, and it's filled. There are hundreds of medical students there, and she says, "Did anybody here ever have an intuitive flash, a know-how, an inner directive?" And a few hands go up. "Oh, you did. Okay, let's call this quadrant the intuitive quadrant." Now, this is the quadrant Frankl calls the noetic quadrant, or the noetic part of us. So he too talks about soma, psyche, nous, body, psyche. The Greek word psyche actually stands for soul, and nous would be spirit. And so, how do we function? We function best when all four quadrants, where they come together at the core, whenever we develop a means, a way to get centered. And we're not going to do it if we're forever busy out there. We have to find time and space to go within, to feel, I know where I am. I know who I am. I have all these quadrants. For some, the mental will be more developed. For others, the emotional. For some, the body. And it's interesting how many professional athletes who really have a very developed body after they reach their later years commit suicide, because they identify primarily through the body. And this also happens with people who are primarily mental. If they have a stroke and they can't think clearly anymore, not worth living anymore. Emotional, we see a lot of emotional responses to any issues. Somebody mentions something that's against what you stand for, and there is an immediate reaction. And that may be just as thoughtless as the provocation was, but when we are in our center, we can choose our response, and then it comes from deeper within, and we mean what we say, and we act accordingly, and then we are being true to ourselves, and we're authentic to others. And so that would be almost a prerequisite for all of us to find time and space daily to center ourselves. And then we deal differently with stresses that come along. In other words, inner peace. Nobody can give it to us. Okay, I'll begin with my family, where I first practiced it. And so, as our children were growing older and older, so did my acquaintance and love of Viktor Frankl's worldview, and I found much in his writings that could be applied immediately and directly while they were growing up. So, striving for authenticity. Be honest, say it like it is, express how you feel, and be there as a listening presence. So they don't have to make something up to please mom and go their way, or dad. Okay, so in that sense, learning to listen to what is important to the other, and including their uniqueness as an individual will come forth. And then also honoring their dignity, who they are. Yes, you might be a couple of decades or more younger than I, and you have this view at your age, wonderful. But again, your choices will bring corresponding responsibilities. I remember my darling daughter sitting outside on the patio eating her lunch. She's preschool, and she's talking and talking and talking and talking. And I look out through the window, nobody there. Who is she talking to? So I go out, say, honey, do you have a visitor? And she says, well, just my friend, the worm, your friend, the worm. Oh, yeah, I give him a crumb here and there, and he likes it, and we talk. Okay, so her concept of interaction was very different from her brothers, let's say, and it made an impact on the young mother I was then. Listen to the kid. Don't criticize her. Don't laugh about it. Don't. It is what it is. And then, um, having practiced this character education in my own little family, now that my children are adults, it's wonderful to see how they all exhibit a strongly developed social conscience based on meaning centered values. And yeah, my oldest son just earned this certificate from the food bank for providing necessary food items. And yeah, he will go and, what do you need? And Easter time it was, oh, we don't have any eggs. And he says, oh, I know some farmers who produce eggs. So he goes, visits the farmer. Do you have eggs? Yeah, there was a sign at the fence for eggs for sale. Yes, we have eggs. No, with the isolation, nobody comes by to buy eggs anymore, so they're piling up. Well, how many do you have? Oh, about 80 dozen. I'll take them. So he gets 80 dozen eggs and takes them to the food bank. So Easter time. No wonder they're pleased. So in a sense, that's his social outreach. My conclusion at this time is life goes on. The body eventually has served its purpose. Its time allotment or its physical strength has been worn out, and it's time to go on. So, who I am, my beingness, uh, the noetic, if you will, the ontology, who I am, lives on. And when we make the transition from this life to the where we came from, we take the wisdom gained from these life experiences with us. And so it's a matter of what wisdom am I gaining? And this becomes helpful in later years, looking back. We can see, oh, once upon a time I dealt with such and so childishly. Would I do this again? No, I have transcended who I used to be, and hopefully I'm wiser now. And so that would be the meaning content. And as Frankl said, when we come to I heard him say that. I was visiting my grandparents in Austria one time, and there was a radio broadcast, and Viktor Frankl was featured. And he addressed the audience, the radio audience, saying, we who have who have had a long life, so this would have been in the 90s, we are ready to take the the harvest of life into the granaries of life. And what is the harvest of life? Exactly that. All the learning we have gained and distilled into wisdom, what's worth keeping. Let go of all the dross, adjust the wisdom, take with us. But the way he put it, we who are ready to take the wisdom of life into the granaries of life. In other words, he was addressing death and dying. And I was so surprised because he had such a rapt audience. Now, granted, my grandparents were up in years, and that he could keep with that topic, that he could attract such a large audience, and later on their friends would talk to them about having heard it and so forth. Whereas here, we don't talk about death and dying. We, more so now, but certainly in the 90s we didn't. Yes, yes, yes. Now, people with a religious faith, and I have asked this from physicians, I have asked this from pastors, from chaplains, what do you find is faith helpful to people? And I get the same answer from every category. They say, depending on if you believe that this is a transition and you go on into a higher state, that's wonderful. If you believe that you have judgment to face and internal damnation, it's not helpful. And so, attending the dying, again, what is mine to do yet before I leave here? Am I at peace with everyone? Do I need to forgive somebody? Do I need to ask their forgiveness? And if so, by all means do it, and you will gain a measure of peace.